Hello?
Hi.
So can you just repeat the code for me on menti.com?
It's oh, sorry. Yes, I realize you're on the phone. Please ignore me. So yes, it is 36
Mm-hmm.
81
Mm-hmm. 17.
1700.
Mm. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And so on that basis, question number one for everyone. Do you agree that the book publishing industry is an industry that welcomes a diverse workforce? Strongly disagree, strongly agree. Okay, two responses so far. Okay, I believe that's nearly everyone. There might be one or two there, but generally speaking, opening response, the book publishing industry, no, we're not necessarily too confident at this moment in time that it welcomes a diverse workforce. Thank you so much for the reflections there. We now move on to the second. What would you like a company like Hachette to publish more of, to better reflect your experience and requirements as a reader or consumer? What would you like a company like Hachette to publish more of to better reflect your experience and requirements as a reader or consumer?
Could you give us an example or something to write, please?
Sure. Oh, so someone has already put something forward. They would like to see more autobiographies, but more generally, I don't want to suggest, but for example, for myself, it could be the case that I want to see more leadership figures from diverse cultural backgrounds. I want to see more people who have things to say which are entertaining, which come from a wider variety of backgrounds. I want to see people who are speaking about a wider variety of issues than maybe I see at the moment. That's all very, very vague, but specifically anything that comes to your mind. And actually, what we've seen so far, really interesting reflections. So, someone suggested younger people, someone's suggested diaspora literature. Very, very interesting. Someone has said specifically divisive issues. Someone has highlighted topical issues. Someone has highlighted inequality as an area that they're really interested in. So some really valuable reflections there. So diaspora literature has gone bigger, highlighting that more of you have voted for it. Someone else has suggested texts that are critical, self-love, mental health, intersectionality, biographies, investing books, female, really, really interesting. Another self-love, but this one without the E. They dropped the E. So much love that there was no space for the E. See, the jokes are coming. They're coming. Um, all right, lovely. Really useful. And just in the interest of time, we've only got a few more of these to flag. Um, what would you like a company like Hachette to publish less of to better reflect your experience and requirements as a reader? Now, again, this is probably a tricky question for some people, but what do you think you're seeing too much of at the moment? What's really crowding the market that you could do without? What is it that potentially you think could be published less? One-sided history books. Oh, okay. We're not gonna ask anyone to kind of comment on them for now, but we will go back round in a moment, and anyone is welcome to give their reflections. Established voices, interesting. Celebrities, populist views. It's interesting because someone said they wanted biographies and not other. Clearly, that's not in agreement with someone over here. Trauma, very interesting. Simplistic texts on race. Hmm. Okay, we're just going to give that a few more moments and then we'll just move on to the next one. Is there anyone that wanted to suggest anything or reflect on anything that's up on the screen or anything that's come up on the previous slide? Feel free to come off mute. Oh, yeah, Victor, go on.
I literally was just going to put in the chat. I don't know if you follow Rennie the Lodge on Twitter, but one time and I found this very interesting. She made a tweet about books that were very similar to hers, which was very interesting because at the same, as much as we need books from voices like hers, at the same time, you don't want clones of them, because that's not particularly helpful. It'll be interesting to get other people's perspective on that because obviously her book was a very successful one. But yeah, at the same time, you don't want to just produce other books that are just like it. You want new voices to say other things. Maybe if they are about race, about other things that are about other things to do with race that are outside of just the general topic that Rennie was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I'll thank you, Victor. That's really absolutely valuable. And I will talk a little bit about how and why I think both publishers and booksellers, in fact, can develop this momentum around a genre or an idea, a strand that really works, and then everybody wants a part of that. And there is a real tendency that once something is working, then people are commissioning very similar titles, booksellers are saying, we would like to sell very similar titles, and then that area becomes very crowded, and there's quite a lot of kind of Me Too publishing that goes on. And then the kind of and then everybody, there can be a certain sort of fatigue that can set in with the lack of originality, which actually can be detrimental, I think, to what authors in that area might be trying to achieve, because it all can just start to look very, very similar, and to your point, starts to lack the authentic voices because it's becoming something that is perhaps being, a little bit produced to order rather than for very driven personal reasons. And I think we as publishers are absolutely guilty of that.
I think, Denise, if I may echo and take further what you and Victor have said, I think it's all right, much like the feminist movement and other movements. I think it's okay if everyone is energized around a particular topic at a moment in time. But what I would like to see is that that people publish books that describe what the phenomena is, what the challenges are, what the root causes of a challenge is, but that further books that are published move the thinking forward, so that they move into solutions, tools, methods, and ways of moving that thinking forward and helping society collectively to solve those problems. So that by collectively, those books that are published actually move humanity forward in relation to that topic.
Awesome. Really, really valuable reflections. And on that basis, we're going to pause the interactive presentation now. Thank you so much to everyone who has voted. We're going to keep up the current slide, which asks the question, do you believe that you have access to book publishers if you wanted to publish an idea right now? But whilst that voting continues, we will take the actual slide itself off the screen. And it's my real pleasure, without any further ado, just to quickly hand over to Denise for her opening reflections. And as mentioned, as Denise is highlighting things, do feel free to come forward with your questions, reflections, suggestions, and she'll be very happy to respond. But for now, Denise, the floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Horatio. And yeah, just to reiterate, I would like this to be as useful as possible. And it's about really answering the questions that you have, rather than what I'm just going to spat at you. So please do raise hands and question as I go along. And I think it's interesting that from the audience this evening, I think it's a mix of people who may be interested in working in publishing, and then others who see a possible future for themselves as authors. So I've pitched this evening around those two key strands, very much as a kind of overview. As Horatio said, I have given parts of this, I wouldn't call it a talk, but sort of session before. So my apologies, Vanessa, if you've heard a lot of this, please go make a cup of tea. I will absolutely not be, if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. And we can
Denise,
pick up.
I'm delighted to hear again. I think I need a refresher.
On your specific questions separately. So thank you very much for coming back. Right, so my intention is to talk just for about 10 minutes or so, and then to take as many questions as you can throw at me. So first thing to say, I'm going to focus this evening on non-fiction publishing. Octopus, who I work for, is a non-fiction publisher, and that has been my entire career, really, in non-fiction. So I know little bits about fiction, but I'm not a specialist, and I will focus on what I know. And to give you a sense of what Octopus publishes, we are a very broad non-fiction publisher. So we've got a list that ranges from illustrated books, so cookery, Abby, to health, lifestyle, and then to narrative non-fiction. So that means everything from a sort of business book by Netflix co-founder Mark Randolph, for example. We have a book by MP Jeff Phillips talking about speaking truth to power. Recent title, Constant Locks, Making Your Voice Heard. Really about representation and development in the workplace, etc. So we do have a pretty broad range of titles. And I think, as highlighted by the pretty shocking, but I'm afraid not unsurprising response to the question, the very first question about effectively representation and diversity in publishing, I think one absolutely has to acknowledge that there are a number of issues with publishing, and the absolutely key one is that it looks very white and exclusive rather than inclusive. And I think perhaps allied to that, but also slightly separate, is that it can be seen not as an industry, actually, not as a serious business in which one might have a professional career. So I think I would absolutely acknowledge that publishing does need to encompass a much more diverse workforce, and to attract staff who will bring experience and perspectives to our publishing output, which will then be much more representative. So I think one of the basic things that I want to do, as well as the specific actions that we're taking as a company, is to really demystify it. I think, a couple of people said they just don't know where to start. They don't really know how publishing works. It looks like this hermetically sealed world. And if I can do anything to kind of, break that down and give people access points, then that's very much what I would like to be doing. And I'm quite passionate, really, about making it clear how that business does work and what are the roles that people who may well be working in other industries could actually do within publishing. And I mean beyond perhaps just the role of editor that may, or publisher that may look more obvious. There are many, many other aspects to publishing that are available that I think are not that transparent. So just to place me within the company, I'm group publisher, and I'm responsible for about £25 million worth of our sort of turnover annually, and I direct the publishing across the various imprints that make up Octopus. So that means I work with colleagues and decide with sales, with other colleagues, which books we take on. Sadly, or perhaps not, that's not just my decision. It's very much a collaborative piece of work. We also look at which categories we should be increasing our publishing in, for example, which markets, whether it's the UK or international markets that are more buoyant, and where we should be kind of directing our commissioning. And then ultimately, I'm responsible for the profitability of those books. And I think it is worth mentioning profitability. Publishing can be a source of great cultural change and good, but it is also a business. And ultimately, we have to take on books that sell. We don't spend too much money on buying them from the authors, and we don't spend too much money on making them in relation to the revenue that they bring in, because otherwise we'd all be out of a job. So it is about publishing books that sell, but I think actually for most of us in publishing, whilst you don't always just get to publish the books that you really feel totally passionate about, it does actually give you a complete kick when the passion projects, the books that are really close to your heart, are also the ones that really work commercially. And that's the kind of sweet spot, I would say, in this job. So just a quick word about sort of other roles that are within publishing that might not be that obvious. There is a whole finance and commercial team. Commercial analysis is increasingly something that we have to incorporate. We have a sales team. We have to sell our books to retailers. And I think this may not be obvious, perhaps, to authors, etc., but we don't automatically get space for our bookshops. So Waterstones, Smiths, etc., they don't have to take the books that we take on. So by the time we come to selling to Waterstones, etc., we've invested in those books. We're producing them, we've edited them, we've designed them, we've done covers, etc., etc. And it is possible that we can't find anybody who will actually stock them. So that's the risk that we have to take on. So we have to persuade those gatekeepers, the book retailers, that they should take those books on, and that's where our salespeople come in. We sell rights around the world, so there is a big piece in selling rights. That might also be TV rights or film rights, etc. Contracts and legal, again, increasingly important as we sell books in lots of different formats now. So print, yes, but also audio. We're investigating podcasts. So that might be that, in fact, as an in-house lawyer, you are negotiating agreements with everybody from Marvel to the BBC, etc. And then agents. And this is the kind of bridge to the other piece of really what I wanted to share this evening, which is about how you might think of getting a book published yourself. Agents are part of a publishing house, but they are a key part of the process, and how you yourselves might actually move to being published. So agents in publishing work pretty much in the same way as they do in other industries, from kind of football managers to estate agents. They take on author clients, they represent them in exchange for a percentage of earnings. And in publishing, that's usually 15 to 20%. So that's of everything that you bring in, whether as an advance or because the film rights for your book sell to somebody, etc. Your agent is going to take that percentage in exchange for acting on your behalf. And most major authors do have an agent. Having said that, that is not, that doesn't apply to everybody. And I actually have a couple of big authors who don't have an agent themselves, because they kind of know how things work. They're able to stick up for themselves. They don't mind rolling up their sleeves. and getting down to that sort of haggling themselves. The best agents will look after a client's career, advising them, for example, on which publicity to do or not do. The worst will just take the money and then let you, as the author, deal with any problems with the publisher. So if you're looking to find an agent, I think I'm very often asked, well, how do you go about that? And I would say research. Agents have particular areas of speciality, like publishers, and personal taste, of course. So I would do lots of online research into agencies and particular agents. Obviously, very basic things. If you're submitting a crime novel, then there's no point pursuing an agent who only does nonfiction, for example. Most agencies have very informative websites, so you can see listings of their existing clients, the books they represent, for example. And when you approach them, if you can kind of reference those existing clients and authors and maybe something of what it says about their taste, you'll just that will just look as if you are familiar with the world, you are sort of pushing some sort of familiar buttons, for example. Another tip would be, if you have books that you particularly like and think are comparable or in the same vein as as the book that you are proposing, look at the acknowledgements of kind of similar books, because very often authors will thank their agents in those acknowledgements, and you'll actually find some particular names. For example, you can follow those people on social media, find out what they're up to, etc., etc. So I think very often people will focus very much on that. Get the agent, doesn't matter almost who it is, but it is a pretty crucial relationship, I would say, because that person is then going to fight for you. They're going to present your book to publishers, so they absolutely have to have superb contacts in the industry and know what they're doing, how to position it, etc. And they're the people you can get to ring up your publisher when, to tell them your manuscript's going to be delayed because your cat has died, or Mercury is retrograde and you can't possibly deliver your book on that particular day. And believe me, I've heard pretty much all of the reasons for not delivering a manuscript that you possibly could. And your agent can basically be the person who stands up for you. You can approach publishers directly. I'd say do your research, and this is particularly the case in nonfiction. And I've certainly taken on plenty of authors because they have, they have a great platform that might be on social media. They have a brand, they have a company, they have a business, shops, etc. That means they have that presence, and an agent isn't particularly necessary in those circumstances. And then something I just wanted to pick up on before we move into questions, because I'm conscious of time here. And really, this is very much to Victor's point. When it comes to presenting your idea, I mean, obviously, this is very much about your voice and your experience, and we're all looking for original, authentic ideas. But when it comes to presenting an idea in-house, because we as the publishers have to put out to a whole room of colleagues, so our sales colleagues, publicity, etc., the idea, the proposal that we want to acquire, and we have to argue as to why we as a company should spend money on it and should publish it. And there's this thing called comps, and those are comparable titles. And this is about as close as it gets in publishing to anything that can be seen as kind of scientific, I would say. But really the only thing that you have to hold on to give you an indication of how a particular title is going to perform, and therefore how many copies you think you're going to sell, and therefore what you think you can afford to offer an author, is to look at similar titles in the marketplace. Now, of course, that sort of bakes in conservatism, because it means you're only ever looking at what's gone before, what's out there. But both within publishers and also when we sell to booksellers, they will ask, well, what's this like? What are the kind of comp titles on this? So you find yourself assessing a project on the basis of what might have gone before, what might be selling at the moment. And I think that is a real challenge. In terms of the challenge of making sure that genuinely original and groundbreaking books get published, because of that requirement. Having said that, there's no absolute formula to this business, and that's one of the things that I think makes it so exciting, is that nobody can really say you can have all of the kind of boxes ticked, you can have all of the elements kind of lined up, and something doesn't work, and then something comes completely out of left field that on paper shouldn't actually sell, and it's a runaway success. So that is the kind of thing, I suppose, that does make us get up in the morning, that you could find one of those absolute gems, and see it really work. So I could talk more about actually how you do pitch, etc., but I'm conscious of time passing, and I can see that there are quite a few questions. So that's a pretty whistle-stop tour. And I think I will hand over at this point, Horatio, to the questions I can see have been coming in.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. I think everyone on the call will agree there is no comp to you, Denise. You have been absolutely spot on today. Thank you again. So to the actual questions that we have so far, and again, for all those who are on the call, do feel free to type any more or raise your hand. The ones that we've got so far, the first one is, how much of a book should be ready before approaching publishers? Should you have an idea, chapter, summaries, a snippet, the whole book?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think this applies as much if you're approaching an agent as if you're approaching a publisher directly. Ideally, I would say you have a quite short summary of what that book is. So you position it. It's, the whole elevator pitch thing is quite a cliche, but I think it's true. You don't necessarily have 3,000 words of an acquiring editor's sort of attention to actually explain what it is. So if you can say, right, my book is it's a memoir, but actually it is tackling the questions of our broken criminal justice system, for example. And this is my experience as somebody who has worked as a probation officer, a barrister, it can be whatever your personal experience is that you're bringing to it. So you've got memoir, you've got what the book is bringing in terms of its where it's going to take people, and your credentials in there. So I would say you have a short pitch, you have a proposed structure for your book, by which I just mean a kind of chapter breakdown. You have a piece of sample writing, doesn't need to be the whole book, but you, as a publisher, you need to see somebody's kind of tone and the level. Is it hilariously funny? Is it kind of academic, etc.? So I would say a chapter would be ideal, and that's it. So you don't need to have completed a whole book before you actually submit it.
Amazing. And then our next question, we're not in any way asking you to sabotage yourself, but the suggestion is, or question is, what are the benefits of using a publishing house over just self-publishing?
Yeah, really, really good question. And, you know, I am very happy to kind of justify my own existence. You know, some people actually can take the self-published route and it absolutely works for them. I think the benefits of not doing that are you get editorial input. So you know, you get somebody who will really push you and work with you, and maybe, you know, be saying, no, I don't think it's quite that. Could you just do this? Could you just do this? Even if you don't want to hear that, but hopefully get a better book out of that. You get marketing. So you know, you could put your book out there, but who's going to know it's there? So, you know, if you have your own platform through which you can market it and publicize it, then that might make sense for you to self-publish. But, you know, that's something to think about. And then physical book distribution. Again, if you just want to publish online, then self-publishing might work for you. But if you want to be seeing your books in actual bookshops, there's a lot of logistical stuff involved in, you know, in printing and getting the books out there, etc., and that's what publishers can bring.
So thank you so much to Abby, who's dropping at the moment. Really great to see you. And on to our next question. Does the author impact whether you take on a book or not? So their follower account, credibility, experience. What are publishers looking for in the author specifically?
Right. Yeah. Great. Brilliant question. Yeah, hugely, actually. You know, sometimes it's possible to have a book which can just sell on its idea alone. But really the author, and I'm sort of hedging my bets a bit here because it does sort of depend on genre, but increasingly the author's social media platform is key, because again, we can take on the book and we can publish it, but then, you know, we want people to know about it. So that is really a collaborative effort to get it out there. And it's the author's experience as well. So, you know, somebody just trying to write about something somehow because they think they should is nowhere near as powerful as somebody who has absolutely lived what they are writing about. And of course, there's expert knowledge as well. You know, if we're talking about some of the perhaps more illustrated areas that we publish in, sort of health, many other areas, you actually do need subject expertise in there as well. So yes, in summary, the author is incredibly important.
Awesome. And there's another question. What is the best route to approaching an agent? So maybe what they're referring to here, beyond what you were explaining before, is it better to send an email? Is it better to meet them in person? How would you approach an agent yourself? And maybe some fewer tips or insights into what kinds of things you should be looking for in that conversation.
Yeah. I think a lot of agents will have on their website how they like submissions, and a submission is just, you know, what you send as your proposal, how they like to receive those. So some people will actually specify, you know, please email me this, which might be your biog, a sample, etc. I think you can connect with people on social media. Always helps to give you a sense of, you know, what they're interested in, what they're up to. It might be that they've just announced, you know, one of their authors has just won an award or has topped the bestseller list or something like that. So, you know, referencing that and just showing that you're you know, you've looked at who and what they represent and have some sense of that and approaching them in that way. So there's no easy answer to that. I think that kind of varies, and different agents have different styles. You know, there are some very old school agents who probably still require you to send in a, you know, double-spaced manuscript or something like that, whereas others will probably be very happy to just, you know, connect with people on Twitter or Instagram, say.
Thank you so much, Denise. So, Victor, I can see that you've got your hand up, and just at this moment, I'm going to ask if there are any final questions that people may have so that we can take this final round of questions and then end the call. So I'm just seeing Victor going once, going twice. Awesome. Okay, so over to you, Victor, for the final question, please.
Cool. So I'll ask one long question and one short question, if that's okay. And the short question is, for when you sign, you know, the papers, how long does that process take for you to get your book actually out into the world? That's one question. And the second question is, this is from a friend actually. Do you, when you sign with a publisher, do you still own the rights to your book? Do you still own the IP? The reason I think that's important, and with my business brain on as well, you know, opportunities might come from that book, and that come from that idea within the book, or and the branding within the book, or whatever it is. So do you still have to go through the publisher to do all of those things that come from it, or do you own the rights to it?
Yeah, and just to ask on your second question first, actually, Victor, what kind of thing are you thinking of in terms of IP exploitation? So maybe creating a website that sits alongside your book, or, you know, TV rights, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm more thinking like TV rights. Yeah, other pieces of writing that may come from the book or that ideas within the book. I'm thinking more of that aspect.
Right. Okay, got you. Yeah, thanks. So to go back to the first question, it varies enormously. So for a text-only book, so something that doesn't have you know, photographs or anything in it, those books are printed, generally speaking, in the UK, and you could get a book out theoretically in about 3 months or so. It takes about 2 weeks to print a book, and then you have to sort of deliver it to sort of shops, etc. Obviously, there is all of the part that goes before that, so that is really not recommended, I would say. An average length of time is about 18 months. So from delivering your manuscript to then having that book out in the world. So you might actually have signed your contract 12 months prior to that. And I know that sounds like a really long time. But various things go into that, working on different drafts, doing the kind of sell-in and publicity piece on it as well. So we will often produce proofs, for example, that we send out to reviewers, to influencers, to people who might then give us quotes for the book that we can then put on the cover, etc., etc. We have to sell into bookshops 6 to 9 months ahead of publication. Then for illustrated books, we have the time that's required to design, maybe do photography, because, you know, if you're doing cookery, you have to set up a whole days and days of food photography, for example. You go through all of that process. We will print, generally speaking, in the Far East. So that takes 2 months of printing. It takes 2 months for the books to actually go into a container in a ship, come from China or wherever to get to the UK. So again, that generally is about 18 months. And it can all be done quicker, much more quickly. So, you know, if you have something that is really time sensitive, It may be tying into, there might be something that's a TV event or something, and you've got to get that book out really quickly. You can, but those are sort of average timescales. And then your second question, when you sign with a publisher, you are giving them an exclusive license in your text. So that means you can't resell that text somewhere else, because a publisher has to know that they have clear ground to sell that, if you like. So if, for example, we're trying to sell your book, and then you're actually selling a chapter as a shorter book on Amazon or something, that clearly is an issue. The rights that you keep is part of the negotiation. So that is what you and or an agent would actually negotiate. So do you give those TV rights to the publisher, for example, so that the publisher can do a deal with a TV company, or do you keep them yourself so that you then go and talk to production companies yourself and make those deals? Likewise, whether you just have the rights in the UK or in different languages or kind of work worldwide, all of that is part of the negotiation.
Thank you so much for that question, Victor, and for the response, Denise. So I know that we had mentioned that was a final question. Please accept our apologies, everyone who's still on the call at the moment. We did have one final question that came in from Vanessa, so we know that it will be worthwhile. Vanessa, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I was just going to ask a favor. Do you mind if I present whilst I ask this question?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm going to just do that now, because I think it might help. So the question was around, and it might be useful for other people, but the question was around how you prepare a pitch. I've been getting different responses. And I didn't mention this, but I have dyslexia and high ADHD, so I'm more of a visual communicator. So the question was, I'd also put in context that I've been advised, because my natural style includes music, it includes art, it also includes a variety of things. And I've been asked to include that within my packaging. So I've not put it in here, but I've just put some of the visuals here. The question is, Denise, what are some of the unconventional ways of pitching a book?
Yeah. So we've had, and absolutely, Vanessa, particularly, I've been very general here, but, we do also do a lot of design and very visually led titles. And you would absolutely expect in those cases that the presentation would be more visual, obviously. So, it is absolutely appropriate to kind of tailor it to the book that you're presenting. We've had book proposals presented in cakes, for example. So, the actual title written on the top of a cake, and then, an invitation to slice into it, and then you find the sort of proposal within it, and obviously that might be for a baking book, something like that. So there aren't really any rules, and there are certainly ways of grabbing people's attention. I think it's more challenging now that we're in this kind of online environment. I really believe in, if I'm approaching people, because we do it the other way around as well, and see potential authors or organizations who are doing interesting things and think, we'd absolutely love to do a book with them. So we're the ones who are kind of pitching in that case. And I will always send as much that is kind of physical as I can. So, other books that we've done, things that I'm proud of having published, a visual pitch, etc., etc. When you're doing that over, whether it's, just Zoom or Teams or whatever, it's a bit harder perhaps to give it that real individuality. But the kind of visuals, and very happy to pick up on this with you directly, separately. The kind of visuals you're showing are absolutely great. it then just needs something that says how you're seeing the book, that they would be, how that would be structured, what the book is about, but it doesn't have to be a 20-page written document.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And also the advice you gave earlier was useful, and I think I'm gonna pick up with you and do a presentation in line with how I process things. So thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'd be delighted to look at that. Thanks.
So on that basis, a really big thank you to Vanessa, a really big thank you to everyone who's been on the call, and most importantly, a very, very big thank you to you, Denise. Now, as we highlighted right at the start of the call, this is, in fact, a series. So the next 5 sessions will be looking at a wide variety of other areas related to publishing. So again, if you look at the website, we will be keeping you updated with what will be happening moving forward in terms of dates and what will be covered on those dates. But for now, please have a lovely evening. Thank you to everyone who has joined. And Denise, any final words from you?
I would just like to say a very big thank you to you, Horatio, for inviting me, and to everybody who's taken the time to be on the call this evening, and some absolutely brilliant questions, and really gives me, I think, something to think about in terms of what we do in future sessions to help sort of focus that to the things that people are most interested in. So really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks again, once again, Denise. And thank you again to everyone. Really appreciate all of the great feedback you've given. Please have a lovely evening. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Denise.